My number one piece of advice is never expect Donald Trump to act like anybody but Donald Trump. And this is something he actually does quite frequently. If he is feeling that he's not getting cooperation from somebody, he hammers them, right? And people can say, well, that's not how you do diplomacy. And honestly, Donald Trump doesn't care. That's his style. If you actually look today, part of Donald Trump's cabinet and many of his closest political allies are people who received kind of barrages of criticism, just like Zelensky. And so what this has nothing to do with Trump spouting Russian propaganda. He doesn't care about that. Has nothing to do with the United States abandoning Ukraine. This is very simple. He has a disagreement with Zelensky, and he wants Zelensky's attention, and that's what that's all about, period.
Doesn't this help?
Разве это не помогает россиянам в плане переговоров?
No, because Russia has no cards to play. Russia is at the point of strategic exhaustion. The Ukrainians are actually putting more ammunition, artillery ammunition in the field now than the Russians. The Russians are relying on North Koreans to help fight their war. They hold less territory today. I mean, they've been at war for 3 years. They hold about the same amount of territory that they held 3 years ago. So Russia is nearly at strategic exhaustion. The United States knows this. Putin has no cards to play. Trump is also very predictable. He offers everybody an off-ramp. He in his first term, he did it with the North Koreans. He did it with the Russians. He did it with the Taliban. That's just the way he deals it. So it's very common for him to say, let me give you a deal and be nice about it. But Trump likes to make deals, but he does not like to make bad deals. He really wanted to do a deal with North Korea, but in the end, North Korea did not say they would denuclearize, so they got nothing. He wanted to do a deal with the Taliban, but the Taliban never actually agreed to terms, so Trump did not give them a deal. It was Biden that just preemptively pulled out of Afghanistan. Trump is offering Putin a ceasefire. If Putin does not take that, then Trump will hammer him with the consequences. I think the definition of giving something to the Russians, which is if the Russians win something at the bargaining table that they don't hold on the battlefield, that's weakness, that's a concession. But just what's going on now, which is just kind of typical blah blah, I think it's just meaningless.
And what do you expect? What kind of red line has Trump, for example?
Какая у Трампа красная линия в том, что Россия требует? Что он может им дать?
Can he expect to give them?
Nothing. Trump's going to give them nothing. It's a typical Russian position to put maximalist demands on the table. They always do that. You know, we have a saying: is you throw spaghetti at the wall. The Russians, they ask for everything. They demand everything. They just always do, and the Russians want to get something for nothing. And the worst thing to do is to give the Russians something for nothing, because then you've best told them you're weak or stupid, and they'll want to take more advantage of you. So the best thing that the U.S. can offer the Russians is nothing, nada, nil. They can say you can get a ceasefire, and that's it. If the Russians and Ukrainians choose to exchange territory, because they both occupy territory now, that's kind of up to the Russians and the Ukrainians. But the United States should give the Russians nothing for stopping the war. The Russians started it. The Russians are the invaders and attackers here. They deserve nothing.
Но они захватили земли.
Well, that's just the reality of what happened. Acknowledging the reality of what happened on the battlefield is not a concession. A lot of war ends this way. This was the situation in West Germany in 1945. You had a divided country. Nobody liked that, but that was the reality. It was the situation we faced in Korea in 1953. We had an armistice in a divided country. Nobody liked it, but that was the reality. It's the situation Israel faced in 1968. That was just the reality. President Trump is saying the best thing for Europe and the best thing for Ukraine that's achievable is to make the war stop. Everybody wants the perfect solution for them where they get everything. But Trump is saying, and I think he's right, and I think most Europeans and most Ukrainians would actually agree with him, the best thing we can do now is stop the fighting.
Но может ли Трамп пойти на то, чтобы навсегда запретить для Украины путь в НАТО?
Forever for Ukraine?
I don't think President Trump actually said that. I don't think NATO membership is on the table. I think Secretary Hezet said that it shouldn't be part of the negotiations. I think that's a question for the future because the reality.
Но россияне этого требуют.
The Russians demand it, but they should get nothing. The reality is there is no consensus for Ukraine to join NATO now. There isn't. So it's a non-issue. And no member of NATO can equivocally speak for all of NATO and say, no, they can never have membership ever. And Ukraine certainly wouldn't agree to that. So this is simply a non-starter.
What would you advise to Ukraine and Europe?
Что бы вы посоветовали Украине и Европе? Как действовать сейчас при Трампе, чтобы добиться успеха? Потому что, например, перемирие может длиться, пока он президент. Но после этого Путин может снова напасть.
Can attack again?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen because if we actually follow Trump's leadership, end the war now, if Europeans actually develop the military capabilities they are capable of and capable of funding, if Ukraine is free and strong and independent, the likely that they'll be more vulnerable to Russian attacks 4 years from now is actually a lot less, not more.
Сегодня Израиль был приведен в пример как сильная страна с мощной армией. Какой должна быть Украина, чтобы США рассматривали ее как важного союзника?
US as ally.
Well, look,
Real ally.
It is in U.S. interest. This is true under the last administration, and it's true under this administration, that a free and independent Ukraine that can defend itself is in America's interest. The only difference between Biden and Trump is Biden didn't have a plan other than throwing money at the problem. Trump wants to end the fighting, which I think strategically is important for Ukraine and for Europe. Ukraine doesn't have to make the case that it's important. It is. Look, if there is a free and independent Ukraine that can defend itself, it's an obstacle to a Russian invasion of NATO. It doesn't matter if it's in NATO or not. So the United States wants Ukraine to succeed. If President Trump didn't care about Ukraine and he didn't care about Europe, he would not have sent his vice president, secretary of defense, secretary of state here. Now, they had some harsh words and they made some tough demands, but it's because the United States wants a Europe that is at peace. The president had some harsh words for Zelensky. He wouldn't have bothered if he didn't care about Ukraine. So I think people are completely misreading the U.S. intentions here. Giving counsel to your fears is not a strategy. It's the absence of a strategy. The Russians want everybody to doubt U.S. leadership. They want everybody to believe that Trump is in Putin's pocket, but it's not true. And you know who knows that? Putin knows it. And Trump knows it. Trump, when people say, oh, you're just Putin's stooge, Trump doesn't care what they say. They've been saying that to him since the first day he came in office. It's never been true. He was tougher on the Russians than anybody in his 4 years in presidency. Russiagate was actually a conspiracy manufactured by his political opponents, which wasn't true. Trump knows he's not a Russian stooge, and he really doesn't care what other people think. So giving counsel to your fears on this, I think, is just misplaced.